Thanks for joining me. I'm going to ask you to concentrate here. I'm going to give you a riddle. But you have to concentrate. You have to be listening to the numbers. So take 1,000 and add 40 to it. Now add another 1,000. Now add 30. Now add another 1,000. Now add 20. Now add another 1,000, and now add 10. What is the total? You should be thinking of a number, and most people will answer 5,000. Of course, the correct answer is 4,100. Well, I'm eager to hear if I got you on that one. Alright, so here we go. 6.2 notes, part 1, radian measure. And I'm going to attempt to explain how to find the radian measure of different angles around the unit circle, and in possibly a different way than you've ever heard before, different way than you've ever heard explained. So we'll see how it goes, and you let me know. And I looked up some videos online, unit circle, just to see if I could find some templates to use for my videos. And there are a million unit circle videos. So the bottom line is that you learn how to find all the angles around the unit circle, and with an understanding, I have found in my years of teaching that with an understanding of where these values come from, you're more able to actually remember where the values are around the unit circle. So let's take, for example, this circle here, and we're talking about the unit circle. You hear a lot about the unit circle in trigonometry, and this it's called the unit circle because the radius is 1. So if we put the center of the circle the origin, that would mean that the coordinates of this point right here are 1, 0. Okay, and the coordinates of this point right up here on top are 0, 1. Okay, well that's fine. You can -1, 0 and 0, -1 here. But the main thing is we also want to make sure we understand that the measure of the angle from the center of the circle all the way to this point here, the measure of that angle is 0. 0 degrees, 0 radians. Okay, so when you don't see that little degree symbol, that means that it automatically means radians. Okay? So if we also remember from the last set of videos, the circumference of a circle is always 2 pi times the radius. And as we said, the radius of the unit circle is 1. So let me get a different color here. If the radius is 1, then the circumference, the distance all the way around the circle, is 2 pi times 1, or just 2 pi. Okay, so that's going to be what we're going to base this description of the different angle measures around the unit circle on, that all the way around the unit circle is 2 pi. And so obviously that means that half of the way around is pi. We also know that halfway around the unit circle, or any circle, we have a measure of 180 degrees. So the angle measure, think about this, the angle measure if you go halfway around is pi radians. So I'm confident that you can find all the degree measures around the unit circle. So again, we're going to focus on just the radians for right now. Okay, so pi radians is halfway around the circle, 2 pi radians is all the way around. Okay, fine. Well, let's just say we want to find the measure of this angle right here. Okay. Well, if we want to find the measure of that angle right there, then we can understanding that this angle right here is halfway to this angle. So if we divide the top half of the circle into 2 equal parts, then this angle measure would be half of the way there, right? Half of the way to pi. And so we would say that this angle measure is 1/2 of pi, half of the way to pi. And if you look at that, 1/2 pi, that's where we get pi over 2. That's where we get the radian measure of pi over 2. Okay, so halfway to pi is 1/2 of pi, or pi over 2. Okay, and then all the way to pi, well, that's pi. If we divide, though, this top half of the circle into fourths, we divide it into fourths, that means that if you start here at 0 and you go all the way over, that's 1/4 of the way to pi. And there's 2/4 of the way to pi. Well, we already said that's halfway. Well, there's 3/4 of the way to pi. 3/4 of the way to pi. And there's 4/4 pi. Well, remember, we call this angle right here pi over 4. Okay, and then this angle over here is 3 pi over 4, and it's because it's 3/4 of the way to pi. Okay, if we went actually past that, we have 1/4, 2, 3, 4, 5/4 of the way to pi, or 5 pi over 4. Okay, we can go 6/4, or we can go back to the halves. 1/2 of the way to pi, 2 halves, and 3 halves of the way to pi, or 3 halves of pi. So 3 halves of pi, we're going to call that 3 pi over 2. 3 halves of pi. 4 halves of pi, well, that gets back to the beginning. 4 halves is 2, so 2 times pi. We already said that that's all the way around. Okay, well, we get back to the fourths. 5/4, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/4. 6/4, well, that's 3 pi over 2, 3 halves pi. And then 7/4. So 7/4 is that right there. So dividing our top half of the circle into fourths, bottom half of the circle into fourths, and we have 7/4 pi, and we call that 7 pi over 4. Okay, I don't know if you already knew this or if you're going to need to replay this, but either way, it's very, very helpful to know how we find these angle measures around the unit circle. So we go 1/4 of the way to pi, pi over 4, and so forth. Okay, well, the circle is getting a little bit busy, so we're going to draw another circle down below, and we'll work on the pi over 6s and the pi over 3s and things like that, those kinds of angles. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's scoot this on down, and starting with a blank slate here, let's go ahead and draw our vertical axis, draw our horizontal axis, and we'll get going. I always like to see how well I can draw a circle. Good enough. Alright, again, starting with 0, ending with pi over there, also 2 pi. Now, instead of dividing the top half of the circle into halves or fourths, we're going to divide the top half of the circle into, I could divide it into thirds, but then I'd miss that middle one. So let's divide it into sixths. Okay, so if we divide the top half of the circle into sixths, like we're slicing a pizza, okay, so we slice the top right, so in the first quadrant, that would be into thirds. Okay, and then the second quadrant, we divide that into thirds. So ultimately what we've done here is we've divided the top half of the circle into sixths. Okay, and that means that when we go from, let's use a different color, how about that? When we travel from the initial side, or from the x-axis, however you want to call it, from the beginning of the angle to this part right here, we've gone 1/6 of the way to pi, and that's our angle pi over 6. So there's our pi over 6 angle right there. Okay, and then we go 2/6 of the way to pi. Well, that's 2/6 of pi. Well, that's pi over 3. Okay, so there's our angle pi over 3. And then we already know about the pi over 2 because that's 1/2 of the way to pi. And so if we think about 6, 1/6 2/6, 3/6, and then 4/6. So 4/6 of the way to pi would be reduced 2 pi over 3. So that's the 2 pi over 3 angle. And then we have 5/6 of the way to pi, and we're going to call that 5 pi over 6. If we continue around the unit circle, then you can probably just kind of pause the video. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about this already, but I think it's really valuable to understand where these come from. And when I've explained this in person to students, they're like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of it that way. And maybe you're thinking of it like that, or maybe you've already thought of it that way. I don't really care if you learn it now or if you've learned it before. Either way, you just need to learn it. Okay? So again, it's helpful to know where it comes from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 pi. And then we have, keep going, 7, 6 pi. 8, 6 pi, we're going to call 4 pi over 3. 8, 6 pi, so you reduce the 8, 6 to get 4/3. So 4/3 pi. If you think about it also, just one other note, if we divided the top half of the circle into thirds, we go 1/3 pi, 2/3 pi, 3/3 pi, so you skip a line every time. Okay, so you skip a line every time, 4/3 pi, 5/3 pi, or 5 pi over 3. So it's kind of easier to think of it in terms of thirds instead of 6 because those are already reduced. And then when you want to get the angle measures that are closer to the x-axis, then you're going to count by 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 pi over 6. So 11/6 of pi, and you get that angle right there. Okay, and so let's clean that one up right there, pi over 6, and we have all the other ones in their reduced form. Okay, and don't forget here we had the, let me put that back in blue, we had pi over 2 there, and we had the 3 pi over 2, or 3/2 pi. So maybe just how you look at these angles will help you remember what they are. Okay, and if we were to put in, let's go ahead and do that, and I had those in purple. So if we put in the angle measures in between these two, then in between the pi over 6 and the pi over 3, well, that's the pi over 4. So there's patterns galore with these guys. Okay, we could just add that there. That's our pi over 4. Okay, if we don't remember what that one is, then we go 1 pi over 4, 2, 3 pi over 4. Okay, so just some reinforcements here. We've got 4 pi over 4. 5 pi over 4 is this guy. Okay, I don't know if you can hear my stomach. It's singing right now. Oh my gosh, 13 minutes. I feel bad for you guys. And then, oh shoot, 5 pi, not over 6, 5 pi over 4. Maybe you caught that. And then 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4 is right there. 7 pi over 4. And we have all of the angles labeled around the unit circle from 0 all the way around to 2 pi. And that's your bread and butter right there, guys. You need to know these things, and you need to study that. And we'll, in the next video, we'll break out the, the next video we're going to talk about the sine and cosine and tangent and all those other 3 reciprocal functions as well. But for right now, your main goal is to know where the angles are around the unit circle. Got it? Please don't take this lightly. It's going to come back to haunt you if you take this lightly. All right. Thanks for spending time with me. I'll talk to you later.